And joining us now virtually is PFF's lead NFL analyst and the co-host of the PFF NFL show, Sam Monson. Sam, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We joke around the league a lot that there's no real off season. How busy have you been recently?
Yeah, there really isn't. I mean, obviously, you get the guts of the season, you go through the postseason, but then you're straight into draft prep, you're straight into the Senior Bowl, and then it's free agency for that little flurry, and then more draft prep, and then there's reviewing the draft for at least a week. But then you get a little glimmer of an off season, you get a little sliver, and that's when everybody tries to take a little bit of downtime before we ramp right back up again with mini camps and training camp, and away we go. So yeah, it's our little bit of quiet period, but it's still all go.
So I was on vacation. I come back on a Monday and the biggest NFL story drops, which was absolutely wonderful news. The Vikings signing Justin Jefferson to a multi-year extension, making him the highest paid non-QB in the NFL. When you saw the news, what was your first reaction?
Yeah, I mean, fully justified, fully deserved for Justin Jefferson. And, he, I think at this point is fairly comfortably the best wide receiver in the NFL. The only other receiver you could, I think, even make the case for at this stage is Tyreek Hill. And obviously Jefferson is younger and sort of right at the start of his career, but he's been absolutely phenomenal since arriving in Minnesota. Wins at all levels, in all ways, incredibly productive. I mean, even last season, he missed almost half the year and still eclipsed 1,000 yards, which used to be the benchmark for wide receivers. So phenomenal player. And I think a good thing for the Vikings to lock him up long term, pair him with their young rookie quarterback now. And they, you can carry one of those giant market resetting contracts on a roster. It's not like as soon as a guy starts angling for that kind of money, well, now's when you start looking to trade him away and cash in. Like, that's the reason you go to the draft, is to find transcendent players like Justin Jefferson. So when you get one, do everything you can to keep him in the building and, maximize what you can get from him.
So I'm guessing your thoughts on the just reloading all of these talented wide receivers coming out of the draft is different than maybe keeping a JJ within your organization?
Well, look, I think it's never been easier to find wide receivers in the draft, but there's still a difference between finding, a random, capable, starting caliber wide receiver and Justin Jefferson. Like, that is the difference between a good starter and a truly transcendent player who is breaking all kinds of records, to start his NFL career. Like, I think Jordan Addison is a good example, right? Jordan Addison looks like a very good player, but right now, and he might get better, he might close that gap, but there's a huge difference between Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson. That, I think, is the difficult thing to replace. So Minnesota did it once before. You traded away Stephon Diggs and you end up with Justin Jefferson. So it can be done, but that's a really small target to have to stick the landing on. I'm not going to tempt fate by trying to do it a second time.
What do you think makes Justin so special?
He's really good at everything. I was thinking about this when the contract was signed. It's obvious what makes, Tyreek Hill special and what made Randy Moss special, 20 years ago. Bigger, stronger, faster, all those kinds of things. Jefferson isn't really any of that. He's good at all those things. He's, a solid size for a wide receiver. He's pretty strong. He's reasonably fast, but he's not the best at any of those things. But he's just good at everything. He's really good after the catch. I think he's deceptively athletic. He has that sort of slightly unusual way of moving. He's very leggy. It's an unusual kind of body type and movement pattern to him. But really, his route running is excellent. He's outstanding at the catch point. I think he's just a sort of 9 at every facet of playing wide receiver, and you roll all that up and you end up with this 10 overall type of receiver.
And even with this contract that the Vikings have entered with Justin Jefferson, they do have a little bit of salary cap space this season to work with. Where would you like to see the Vikings try and reload or add depth at? What position?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've done a good job at, isolating the important positions, wide receiver, edge rusher, offensive line, putting their resources there. Obviously, they spent on the quarterback in terms of draft capital, and same with edge rusher with Dallas Turner coming in. The one sort of area where you look at this team and you still see a potential problem is at corner. You know, they've added some players, guys like Shaquille Griffin coming in has the chance to be a really nice sort of buy low opportunity on somebody that has pretty quality play on his resume in the past. But they need somewhere to sort of step up either from the young players, or that I think would be the next area where they invest pretty heavily to try and upgrade that group. I like overall what they've done on the defensive side this offseason, sort of added some talent to a group that was getting by last season with a lot of smoke and mirrors from Brian Flores schematically. I think they've done a good job of upgrading the talent with some versatile players that can help that scheme maximize what it's doing. But now's the time to find some corners to really sort of round out the unit.
You mentioned the use of draft capital, the names that they've been bringing in, and we haven't actually talked to you since the combine. So what did you make of the 2024 Vikings draft class?
Yeah, I think it was a fascinating kind of approach from a process standpoint, right? We're always rather analyzing Kwesi as, you know, this analytics GM or this guy with a finance background, and what exactly is his tenure going to look like? What is his approach in the draft? And this was a really sort of interesting case study in that first round where everybody expected the Vikings to trade up to 4 or 5 and go get the quarterback that way. And JJ McCarthy was the guy that most people expected them to get. On the one hand, they had the discipline to wait that out. They didn't, you know, go with a big trade. They end up trading up just the one spot once he got right to their pick. But then they made a big trade to go and get Dallas Turner once he started to slide. And instead of him going number 8 overall, which is where most people had him, he started to slide within reach of Minnesota. So when the sort of analytics approach would look at that and say, good move on the quarterback, bad move on the edge rusher. But I think if you look at it holistically and say, Minnesota effectively packaged the same trade that people were expecting them to give up to go to number 4, number 5. But instead of just coming out of it with the quarterback and JJ McCarthy, they also came out of it with arguably the best defensive player in this draft. If you look at it in those terms, I think you can understand a lot more why they did what they did and how they went about it. So even just the first round, I think, was a really good move and an interesting sort of window into how Kwesi thinks about the draft and players.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I'm going to end this interview with a really fun fan question that I recently received from our man James. He wants to know, will the offense or the defense be better this year?
Ooh,
right? Well, isn't that fun?
Yeah. I think actually the defense is going to end up being a better unit. They did amazing things last season without the talent to match it. I think they've added a lot of versatile talent this year with Dallas Turner, Andrew Van Ginkel, Griffin we mentioned, and the young guys that they've already got. I could see that group being very good this year.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for playing along with our fan, James. We appreciate your time, Sam. You can follow him on X at PFF_Sam, Sam Monson, the co-host of PFF's NFL show and the lead lead NFL analyst for PFF. Thank you so much for your time.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.